Welcome, fellow castigators. I recently watched the new episode of Doctor Who, Lucky Day, so that you don't have to. This is the first one of the season not written by Russell T. Davies. Instead, it's by Pete McTighe, the guy who writes all those weird shorts on classic series box sets.
Hey, that's my line.
Lucky Day begins with the TARDIS landing in London on New Year's Day 2007. The Doctor is finally wearing a properly Doctor-ish coat, but he's wearing it with a t-shirt and beanie because we can't have nice things. He meets a little boy named Conrad, who witnessed the TARDIS materializing. We cut to an adult Conrad interviewing Ruby Sunday and her awful new haircut on his podcast. The theme goes, and then we're thrown back a bit in time to Conrad walking down the street. He hears a shriek coming from a warehouse and goes to investigate. Conrad gets green ooze on him and then sees the Doctor and Ruby zap an alien called a shriek. Yes, they named the thing that shrieks a shriek.
Are you pretending to write?
No.
The Doctor says that the pheromones in the ooze marks you as future prey, and he gives Ruby an antidote. I need to mention real quick that this scene is 1,000,000 times better than any interaction with Belinda thus far. Millie Gibson has so much more charisma, and sure, Ruby isn't any more developed than Belinda is, but at least Ruby makes the painful dialogue easier to watch. Anyway, we cut to Ruby on Conrad's podcast, where she stupidly talks about her adventures with the Doctor. She holds back on a lot of details, but ultimately reveals too much. Anything would be too much. Ruby and Conrad begin to date, wherein she tells him that the Shriek live in a pocket dimension and leave their hive once a year to hunt. But Unit has captured the one that is after Conrad. At dinner, Ruby spills the beans about everything, even taking the time to mention that the Doctor is gay, just in case you didn't notice.
Yes, Queen!
Conrad and Ruby kiss and then go on holiday to the country. Ruby calls Kate Lethbridge Stewart to talk about her feelings, and Kate checks on the Shriek to make sure it's still in its impenetrable metal cage. Ruby hangs up and talks to Conrad about her feelings, and then the Shriek show up anyway. Conrad and Ruby go outside with a fire poker and a cricket bat to attempt to beat the creatures into submission. Unit arrives in a helicopter where it's revealed that the two Shriek are a couple of Conrad's buddies in costume. Conrad opens his shirt to show a Think Tank t-shirt, which I assume is a reference to the episode Robot. He says that he wants to expose Unit for their lies, even though he's seen aliens for himself and confessed as much on his podcast. The protesters and Conrad are arrested, and then released soon after. Conrad mounts a smear campaign against Unit, which somehow convinces the public immediately. So the live stream in the countryside was supposed to show that Unit is fake, except that you can see that the guys in the Shriek costumes are two of Conrad's cronies laughing along with him. Wouldn't the public see this as more of an elaborate prank on Unit? And wouldn't the British government be quick to launch their own PR campaign? Surely making a case for Unit would be pretty easy at this point. Anyhow, Conrad doxes various members of Unit, and somehow doesn't get arrested for it. I'm surprised he didn't get arrested for social media posts about illegal aliens. Kate looks up the browser history of Unit's mole and concludes that he's in a echo chamber of disinformation. Except he literally works at Unit? Surely he's seen a lot of weird stuff. Conrad uses the mole to infiltrate Unit with a gun, so he can force Unit to admit they're lying. I have to say this is a pretty poor plan. He's got them by the balls, and this is what he chooses to do next? Kate refuses to comply and moves to release the Shriek, but Conrad doesn't use the gun on anyone. For some reason, Conrad still doesn't use the gun on the Shriek after, but misses his chance and then fires wildly. The Shriek, of course, corners Conrad, who folds and admits that he was lying about Unit. Kate was live streaming this, which ends up being enough to sway the public. Ruby tases the Shriek before it can eat Conrad, and then Ruby and Kate talk about their feelings. I'm very annoyed with how the episode flip-flops on whether Conrad believes in aliens or not. The script needs Conrad to believe in aliens enough to start his podcast, but be disbelieving enough to be willing to be face-to-face with the Shriek and not shoot at it. Conrad builds his platform on sharing evidence of alien life, and then successfully uses his platform to convince people that aliens aren't real. I don't think you can have it both ways. Anywho, the Doctor materializes the TARDIS around Conrad in his holding cell and decides to give him a stern scolding. He proceeds with what is easily the cringiest speech in Doctor Who history. The Doctor passionately rants about how much noise there is on social media. You know, you could just delete it if it bothers you so much. When Conrad won't accept his scolding, the Doctor then spitefully tells Conrad that he will die alone and unloved at the age of 49. First the Doctor celebrates Alan's death, and now this? Where's his empathy? This is the same man who has shown pity for even Davros on multiple occasions? Sure, the Doctor has had to wrestle the odd man into an acid bath, but he never enjoyed it. Doctor Who writers have become so spiteful toward the people they hate that the Doctor has become a very ruthless character. He's a far cry from the Doctor we saw in Genesis of the Daleks, who couldn't bring himself to detonate the Dalek incubation chamber. This new character leaves Conrad back in his cell, but Conrad is immediately released by, you guessed it, Mrs. Flood. I think what we can surmise from this episode is that Pete McTighe is one of the biggest shills on the planet. He went from defending corporations like Amazon in Kerblam to now trying to use UNIT as a way of defending the UK government. This episode is constantly banging on in the least subtle way possible about how they keep people safe. The problem is, today's Britain will experience an inordinate number of Muslims stabbing people, and then when Keir Starmer goes up to the podium to talk about it, he declares the terminally online as the real terrorists. I don't think audiences will appreciate that this is who McTighe is shilling for. It doesn't help that his metaphor doesn't even work. UNIT is not a comforting example of government. They have a godlike monopoly on alien weaponry, but their entire system is easily toppled by a single mole. It's not a good look for an organization led by an increasingly fragile woman and her band of incompetent diversity hires. They were quickly cornered by a single podcaster who couldn't propagandize his way out of a paper bag. We're supposed to believe that Kate is upholding her father's legacy, but he would have shot the Shriek in the face the first chance he got.
You don't need to go. You don't need to go on playing soldier anymore.
I'm not playing.
Could you imagine Yates or Benton and their band of merry men letting UNIT be taken over so easily? I don't think Pete McTighe is sending the message he means to send. He shows how the government is hypocritical and incompetent. He shows how whiny and spiteful he and his goons in the mainstream media have gotten, and he calls the audience stupid just to top it all off. He calls the British public stupid at the very least. This episode has so many huge, glaring issues, and then he has the audacity to criticize the intelligence of others. However, there is one thing about this story that really delighted me. The villain of this piece is a male podcaster, i.e., the most common detractors of modern Doctor Who. It makes me indescribably happy that we have gotten to these people so successfully. Sure, they're probably thinking of bigger fish like Nerdrotic, whose infamous hashtag was mentioned in Lux. But we were a part of that, my fellow castigators. I was one of those happy few who went through the pain and effort of reviewing every episode last season. And thanks to your support, the word is out and no one has been watching this season. I never thought I'd say this about my favorite show of all time, but I am so glad to have had a hand in the glorious death of Doctor Who. We really got under their skin. We're halfway through the season, and The Well was the only one so far that didn't go out of its way to belittle and demonize the true fans of this show. It's frankly hilarious, the amount of time, money, and effort they've put into spiting little old me. They could be making Doctor Who for the love of it, focusing on good stories and characters, but their ego is much too big for that. They want you dead and they think it's funny. But it doesn't matter, because no one is watching, and my beloved Doctor Who can finally be laid to rest. The selfish people who destroyed it are now stewing in their indignation, left to perform their empty moral posturing for an apartment full of cats. I had hoped that Russell T. Davies would get his mojo back. I even had a modicum of hope for Pete McTighe, who actually seems to know something about the lore. Unfortunately, any desire to please the audience was drowned out by the desire to please themselves. Personally, I can't wait to see the next episode and see what petty insecurity is featured next. You see, Doctor Who died a while ago, my friends. The quality died all the way back when Chris Chibnall became showrunner. The character died when he bi-generated and the story was taken over by his clone/son being. And now the IP is finally dead with the inevitable cancellation of the show. The writers of modern Doctor Who can seethe all they want, because in the end, I got what I wanted. I guess it's my lucky day. Thanks for listening.